Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Ed from me, and today what we're going to be doing is changing the front struts on the BMW Z4. We're also going to be adding reinforcement plates. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what the reinforcement plates are, but my struts, after doing one side of the car, I definitely know that they're not performing as well as they should be, so it was definitely a good time to change the struts. I've been getting some feedback from you guys. Some of you guys like it when I do voiceovers over my videos. And some of you guys like it when I just talk as I do things. So what I'm going to do is a little bit of combination of each to compromise, and what I'm going to do is through the time lapses I'm going to be telling you guys things that I kind of wish I knew doing these projects, and it'll give you more insight as to what the job entails, whereas you'll also be with me hearing about every little thing that I find out, and things that don't always go as planned, you'll also get to see. So based on your guys' feedbacks, that's what I'm going to be doing for videos from now on. So why don't we get started, all right?
Obviously, for the first part of this job, what you're doing is jacking up the car. Make sure that when you jack up the car, you loosen up the bolts ever so slightly before you actually lift up your car, or else you'll have trouble actually releasing the bolts later on. Make sure that you use jack stands so that you protect yourself in case of the failure of the hydraulic jack.
Okay, so once you get the wheel off, you basically have to take off the sway bar end link, and then you have to loosen this bolt right here. When I get to it, I'll tell you what size it is. I just did the other side, but I already forgot exactly what it was. So you have to loosen this and that. And it helps to actually have a second jack. So in a little bit, I'll show you what we use that for as well. Okay, so the sway bar end link is a 16 millimeter. You basically have to take the nut off on one side, but on the other side, you have to clamp it down so that it doesn't spin on you.
You're going to want to use some WD-40 or some penetrating fluid, or else these bolts are probably not going to come out that easily.
Alright, now after you get out this bolt, it's not going to want to come out, obviously, because the other side, the sway bar, is in a completely different position. So this end link definitely does not want to come out. So I'll show you how you can get that out. All you need is a crowbar, and what you want to do is put it so that you have a structural component meeting the sway bar, so that you can push, as you can see, you can push down the sway bar and you'll see it wiggling out. And once you have it in the right position, it should come right out like that. And you're all set on the sway bar end link. Next thing that we're going to attack is this bolt down here. Alright, so this bolt right here is an 18 millimeter bolt. You're probably going to want to use a breaker bar for this one. So you're just going to loosen this a couple of turns until you feel like you can maneuver the strut out of there. It's basically held on, I believe it's called a knuckle, and it's held on where the strut sits inside of it, and this bolt clamps it down so that it can't move. So you're not really taking this bolt out, all you're doing is loosening it. So you heard that? Basically, now that you know the strut is free from the knuckle, you don't have to loosen it any further. Next thing that you want to do is loosen the top bolts, the 3 bolts on the top. And when I say loosen, I really just mean loosen. Don't take them off. You could take off 2 of them, but make sure that you leave one still hanging. These bolts right here are 13 millimeter bolts. Let me talk about why I'm adding a reinforcement plate here. So this is the strut tower, and one of the things with these BMW Z4s, as well as I believe like the E46, the E36, is that there's a thing called mushrooming. So instead of this metal right here, which isn't actually really strong metal, instead of this piece of metal staying flat, over time it kind of balloons out. So like, I'm going to try to find the best angle for you to see this, but the bolts inside, the bolts on the strut aren't actually facing directly parallel to one another. You can see that they're kind of, in a way, folded out a little bit. I'm not sure how well you could see it, but it's definitely visible to the point where you can see that there's a mushrooming effect instead of this part being flat. So BMW sells a reinforcement plate, which is this plate right here, made out of much stronger metal, and it basically sits here on the underside to keep the strut tower from actually ballooning. Alright, so at this point there's actually nothing holding your brake system and the axle onto the strut. So what you have to do is put a jack under here to support it, because when you take the strut out, this is going to fall. So with the second jack, all you have to do is have something there so you can support it. You just want to lower it to the point where you could actually take out your strut, but not so much that the brake lines start to get tension on them, because you definitely don't want to mess with that and cause a brake leak. So once it's down a bit, you should be able to sort of maneuver it upwards. And since it's probably been a while since your strut has been changed, it's not going to really want to move up that easily. If you have trouble getting the strut out, just loosen the bolt a little bit more. Alright, so we got the strut out. Next thing to do is to put on the spring compressors here, and then we'll take off this top mount and we'll move all the hardware to the new strut. So let me show you why I decided to actually change my suspension. Just take a look at that. That is the strut mount, and that is basically a crack throughout the entire top of it. And I've heard of horror stories where this thing completely cracked, and as you can imagine, this middle part will go up and right through your hood. So I'm glad I actually caught on to that before it actually happened, because it's pretty close to actually reaching all the way around. The only spot that doesn't have a crack is right here, maybe like 4 millimeters or so. So I'm really glad that I didn't take any hard bumps, because if I did, it definitely would have been a problem. If you look like at right there, you can already see that this bolt is basically facing outward instead of facing straight up. Let me show you the new strut mount. The new strut mount, as you can see, the bolts, this plate right here is completely flat and the bolts go straight up. You could see here with the old strut mount that it basically ballooned out already and started mushrooming with the strut tower. Alright, let's get everything swapped over. So I just got to attach these spring compressors on, and from experience, you should definitely be using 2 of these and not just one to save yourself time. Don't ask me how I know.
There are a variety of spring compressors that you can use. The one I'm using is pretty standard. Just don't try to do this job without a spring compressor, because you're really going to be putting your life or other people's lives in danger.
Before you actually clamp down the springs here with the spring compressor, it's a good idea to start to loosen this nut right here. This is a 21 millimeter nut, and what I would do is loosen it to the point where it's almost about to come off, but make sure that you don't let it come off, because if it does, this thing's gonna go not really flying, but it could definitely do a lot of damage because there's a lot of stored energy. So I'm just keeping track of how many threads there are, and I'm gonna back it out a little bit at a time, keep checking to make sure that there's no chance of this thing just flying off without me wanting it to. So I still got a lot to go, which is good, but I'm gonna keep checking until maybe there's about 2 or 3 turns left before it comes off. Alright, so it's almost ready to come off. Now is the time to actually compress the springs. Usually for this part I'll use a power tool, but I don't feel like grabbing it out, so I'm just going to be doing this by hand. One side of this you're only going to be able to grab 2, or basically grab 1 coil, and the other side is where you're going to be able to grab basically 2 coils with 1 coil in between. This is the side that's going to be basically doing most of the work. Alright, so yes, I am wearing flip-flops. Once you're ready to actually back the bolt out, you just keep loosening it until it pops right off. And if you do it properly, aka if you use the spring compressor the right way and it's compressed enough, you should be able to get it off without any popping whatsoever. See? So take off the old strut mount that's destroyed and reuse all these pieces. Well, for me at least, I'll be reusing all these pieces from the old strut. All right, bump stop, shroud, and that. So this is the old strut. Let me show you how bad it is. Look what I could do with it. I bet you the same as, yep. It should not be that easy. And look how slowly it comes back up. That's how you know you have a bad strut. It should definitely not be that slow. It shouldn't be that easy to compress, and it shouldn't be that slow either. It comes right down, and it barely comes back up. That is a bad strut. So, time to transfer things over to the new strut. So this is a new strut right here. Bilstein B4s. Probably should have gotten the B6s, but these will do. So, first piece. Okay, then put on the cover and the bump stop. Push it all the way to the bottom. Kind of maneuver it around to make sure that it's seated. And the reverse. So flip it. And there's only one way this goes on. So make sure that you line it up properly. And the way that I do it is I just follow where the old markings of the spring sat. There's only one way that this should sit. Make sure that you do it properly, because again, don't ask me how I know. So as you can see, even though this bottom part is sitting, this top part is not in the right spot. Why? Because this side only got one coil, this side got one between, so 2 coils total. If I could grab these outer ones, I would have, and I should have, but I can't because these parts were actually touching the top and bottom of the strut. So we'll make it work. You kind of just got to maneuver it so that it works. So that it's sitting in the right spot now. Okay. Washer. Another washer. I think these are the compressible ones. Okay. And then our new strut mount. This should always be able to sprint freely, even after you tighten it down. And don't ask me how I knew that one either. In terms of everything else, it's basically reverse order. After I put this nut in, I'm going to release these spring compressors. I'm only saying this because I think my GoPro is about to die. But basically, you just put it back in the reverse. I'll try and do a time lapse of as much as I can, and I'll do a voiceover in terms of things that you should know. Other than that, that's basically the end of this video. So thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any questions about this process, just let me know. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.
You're going to need an Allen key to put the bolt back on the top, and I believe that is a 7mm Allen key. Other than that, the reverse steps are pretty simple. Just make sure that you use a crowbar for the sway bar end link again, and you should be good to go. Enjoy your new struts, guys. I'll see you guys next time.